she's got a lot of interesting stuff. I would invite you to go check out her blog. Her name once more, or blog, Instagram, however she has a presence online, Marcy Albus Walker. So check it out. She's got some really cool stuff. Next thing I want to read to y'all comes from Chris O'Donoghue, an Irish poet. And he wrote a poem, sort of a poem prayer about citizenship. And I select this one specifically because tonight we're going to be talking about the Roman Empire and what either being a citizen or being a refugee meant. And so this is another little lovely collection of words to get our wheels turning, our mental wheels turning. So let us listen to this. In these times when anger is turned into anxiety and someone has stolen the horizons and mountains, our small emperors on parade never expect our indifference to disturb their nakedness. They keep their heads down and their eyes gleam with reflection from aluminum economic ground. The media wraps everything in a cellophane of sound, and the ghost surface of the virtual overlays the breathing earth. The industry of distraction makes us forget that we live in a universe. We have become converts to the religion of stress and its deity of progress, that we may have courage to turn aside from it all and come to kneel down before the poor to discover what we must do, how to turn anxiety back into anger, holy anger, how to find our way home. So some opening reflections as we start our time tonight. Next comes our song, and tonight is the familiar spiritual Children Go Where I Send Thee. And so I'm not going to have the lyrics up because the ones that were supplied are incorrect. There was a little editing error with the book. So I invite you just to listen. I'm going to play that, get into a comfortable place, and we will listen to our opening spiritual tonight. Here we go.
Children, go where I send you. How shall I send you? I'm gonna send you one by one. One for the little bitty baby who's born in the land. Children, go where I send you. How shall I send you? I'm gonna send you two by two for Joseph and Mary. One for the little bitty baby who's born in the land. Children, know where I send you. How I send you. I'm gonna send you three by three for the good old wise men, two for Joseph and Mary, one for the little bitty baby who's born in the land. Children, know where I send you. How shall I send you? I'm gonna send you for my fall, for the shutters that knocked at the door, three for the good old wise men, two for Joseph and Mary, one for the little bitty baby who's born in the land. Children, go where I send you. How shall I send you? I'm gonna send you five by five, five for the animals in the stall, four for the shepherds that knocked at the door, three for the good old wise men, two for Joseph and Mary, one for the little bitty baby who's born in the land. Children, know where I send you. How shall I send you? I'm gonna send you six by six, six for the stars that shone so bright, five for the animals
Nice. All right. And let's see. I just saw that text, Chris. Sorry, I had it maxed out as heavy as I could on my laptop. I'm sorry if it wasn't able to be heard too well. Apologies for that. Our let's see. Our focus scripture. Sorry. I never write lessons the same way twice, and so I'm in a different order than where we were last week. So we're going to go to our scripture, and I'm going to pull this back to screen share. Let me get these pulled up. Okay. First one is from Luke, and then the next one is from Matthew. So Luke chapter 2. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in bands of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. And item interesting to note, this is all we've got on the birth story from Luke. So it's very fascinating to see what details gospel writers choose to lift up and which ones the way they make decisions on what they included is always fascinating. All right, the second one, Matthew. So this is after his birth, but it's still going to be pertinent for tonight. Now, after they had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. Remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt and remained there until the death of Herod. This was to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I have called my son." When Herod saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, remember they went home in a different way. When he saw he'd been tricked by the wise men, he was infuriated, and he sent and killed all the children in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had learned from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken through the prophet Jeremiah. A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing in loud lamentation, Rachel weeping for her children. She refused to be consoled because they are no more. When Herod died, an angel of the Lord suddenly appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are seeking the child's life are dead." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called a Nazarene. So these are our scriptures for tonight. And the first thing that I want to say as we get into our study, and I'll unmute everybody. All right, there we go. So the first, that way, if you have a comment, we can share it on the fly. Politics and power firmly belong, my opinion, in any discussion about scripture. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by that. The lessons of Christianity are about ways to live, ways to love, and pretty much a whole lifestyle of spiritual behavior. And it deals with power, with vulnerability, with compassion. And it's impossible to pull apart how to exercise those things in a world that is not in balance with larger themes, which often a political world, regardless of what era of time we live in, generally that is about true. So I think it's essential that politics of what we study in scripture are discussed and known. And I think it's important for us to have a calibration toward the current political system in our modern times as Christians because we have to respond. And it's part of what it means to be a disciple, right? So we look at the New Testament and the Gospels. It is it's clear time and time again that Jesus' ministry on earth, even though a few years, was firmly dealing with inverting power structures, reversing power structures. That's one of my favorite phrases I love to use with all in these weeks here, reversals, right? So who's in and who's out. And this means that it tipped on its head the people in power, and they did not like Jesus coming and declaring in a wider way who's in and who's out is going to be thrown wide open. Everyone's in. Of course, people in power don't like that. So in Rome, the empire at the time, Jesus' life was a threat to them all the way from his infancy to when Rome takes his life on the cross. And we see that in this reading that we had from Matthew's gospel about Herod. So that's why they had to escape to Egypt. And it's really good that we've got multiple gospel accounts. That's not in Luke's story. So in the wider context, we get to piece this together to see the whole picture. And culturally, one of the themes that we've talked about over these couple weeks is the reality that the story of Jesus, the time of Advent, the Christmas season, has been airbrushed. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. Airbrushed to be a time of just pure joy and celebration, God in the flesh. And celebrating is key. It's definitely essential. But his arrival also meant a threat to those who didn't like what he was about to say or embody. He was born under the shadow of an empire. And that is why politics are important to keep in our mind as we study Scripture. So this census that is imposed on the people, it's definitely a power move. And as I was reading this and thinking about it, I chuckled a little bit because, not much has changed in some regards. The current census and the embroilment with trying to not count immigrant or migrant populations. And this is modern history we're in. And that's one way that is being used. So like anything, a census can be a tool for good, or if it's manipulated, it can be a tool for oppression. And in our example from Scripture, it is firmly a tool for oppression. So here's what I mean by that. Rome's census. Rome did not need to conduct the census to get accurate numbers or demographics of who lived where, or for, like the sociologist of the time to analyze how the empire is doing. No, the chief reason was for power. And when you drill into it, it was for taxation, for money. So taxation, it was, incredibly burdensome in biblical times. It's not a picnic in modern times, but it was really burdensome back then because people who were already impoverished, not Roman citizens, these are people who lived at the very edge of existence, right? So they had to be counted for a census. Meant you had to go to your homeland. So you had to take a journey if you happen to live far away to pay money that you virtually didn't have because you were impoverished. So the trip was long. It was arduous. And it was like pouring salt in the wound of somebody who's already poor. So this is why Joseph and Mary have to travel in the middle of her pregnancy. They don't have a choice to do it sometime later when the baby's born and things might be easier. And so Caesar, it's a classic move, moving a power move, just moving people around simply by demanding it, by speaking it. I want to show you a picture. So I've been showing you these last 2 weeks paintings that depict Mary and Joseph in contrasted to modern Middle East images. I got one tonight that is from a Methodist church in Southern California. Reverend Karen Ristine is the pastor there. Some of y'all, this is a few years old, but some of you might remember this thing. And let me get this pulled up. All right. So it's exactly what you think it is as you look at it. It's Joseph, Jesus, and Mary in cages that have barbed wire across the top. And Pastor Ristine, she had this to say about this nativity display that they chose to do at her church. She said that in a time in our country When refugee families seek asylum at our borders and are unwillingly separated from each other, we consider the most well-known refugee family in the world. Is definitely a heavy image. They're not mincing or parsing. They're not mincing what they want us to think about when we look at this. And like you might expect, there were there were a lot of reactions. A handful of people loved it. A handful didn't know what to do with it. A handful were angry about it and disliked it strongly and let them know. But even as jarring as this might be to look at, I show it to you because I think it's important. Every place we can think about to remember that Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, baby Jesus, when he was born, they were refugees. And so to get our mind into active thought helps to remember that. So going back to this theme of reversals, right? Reversals of power. The first who notice the baby's birth are shepherds, peasants, outsiders, the Gentiles, the Magi, and then, of course, Mary and Joseph, peasants as well. So for Luke, this power that Jesus' birth brings as Emmanuel, as God with us, is a person who will preach, teach, heal, and resurrect the world. So what does it mean to us as we read it today and we think about it today? There are familiar themes that still carry into modern times: overreach of the powerful, anxiety and fear, terror, many lacking the basics of bread and water, and there is oppression and arcane laws, lack of social safety nets. So we're not alone in a world that isn't entirely unlike the one Mary and Joseph were in. It's just a modern version, if you will. So writer Eric Barreto, he said, if we are not alone in such a world, then we can step forward in faith. If we are not alone, we can be bold and prophetic and courageous in a world that tells us to be quiet and accommodate. We can hope for deliverance for this world. So we're going to swing now over to the African American aspect of this study. And actually, friends, I'm going to get you to pause. I need you to pause with me for 1 second. I have to, I'm recording this, right? I have to free up some space so that it doesn't run out. So I'm sorry, bear with me 1 minute. Of all things. All right, we're getting there. Okay, I think I freed some space up, so this will be saved. So swinging over to the themes, what this would have meant for enslaved Africans at the time, this watching, this waiting, this wondering. So Kirk Dugan, our author, she says there's a deep irony in that much has been made of European immigrants who figured out how to feel indentured peasantry and participate in the carving out of new countries in the Americas. They imagined freedom on a land not owned and inherited by nobility, and they roamed that land until they found a portion on which to build their new heritage, right? How unfortunate the land they found belonged to other people, the Native Americans. How unfortunate that some instituted an even more oppressive system from which they had escaped and imposed it on Africans whom they imported to America in chains. But this did not stop the Africans or their descendants from using their own imaginations to sing about the freedom of movement, going from one place to another. It did not stop them from watching, waiting, and wondering about a time when they too would be at liberty to go where God sent them. So as a little primer, refresher, legal context and early American legal history, stuff that I hadn't thought about since elementary school and middle school. The first Fugitive Slave Act was in 1793, and it was part of the Constitution under the then President George Washington. So it authorized local governments to operate across state lines in order to seize and return escaped slaves to those claiming to own them, and it imposed penalties on anyone who helped in their escape. And then, of course, like we know now, freedom supporters, freedom lovers resisted. Secret networks were created, Underground Railroad, most famous one, of course. So during this time, Kirk Dugan, our author, she says about spirituals, and I'm quoting her, the Negro spiritual came into being, tangible evidence of the hope of the slave. In the midst of oppression, suppression, and repression, Africans in America continued to watch, wait, and hope for freedom by creating songs that express the ability to go. Like our one from tonight, "Children, go where I send thee." And in the scripture, three different times a vision that's attributed to Joseph, an angel comes and says, "Get up and go." So movement is a theme for this evening. The theology in spirituals is a beautiful sort of spiritual folklore that's embedded into the songs, and it indicates a knowledge and an understanding, a deep understanding that God was oppositional to the position of their masters, of the white slave owners. So here's some examples that are not from "Children, Go Where I Send Thee," but some other spirituals. So some folk stories that are embedded into the lyrics of these songs, they tell of a people who responded to the wisdom of an elder and sprouted wings and walked on air to freedom. There's another one. There was a slave revolt of Igbo tribesmen. They were transported to St. Simon's Island, South Carolina. Rather than submit to slavery, they ran aground their mutinying vessel at Dunbar's Creek, and the lore goes they chose to walk back to Africa through the water, singing, and the slaves looking on who watched this happen remembered the melody to describe it. That's how the legend goes of that song. So in our one from tonight, "Children, Go Where I Send Thee," the singers are transported in their minds to a state in which their bodies are free to live and to move and have their being in God. And the song gives them a chance to imagine or walk alongside the biblical heroes and the apostles mentioned in the song. Swinging back over to the biblical context now, Galilee, where Joseph was from. For hundreds of years, prior to New Testament times, Galilee and Nazareth, they were ridiculed. They were not places that were treated with respect. Isaiah 9, it describes the land beyond Israel, beyond the Jordan, as the land of the Gentiles, the unclean. And that's where Galilee is. Even if you fast forward a few hundred years to New Testament times, from Isaiah's time, not much had really changed on that cultural opinion. In John's gospel, as the new disciples are coming to Jesus, one of the new disciples goes to Nathanael and says, "You need to come see this man that we have found." And Nathanael famously asks, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That jab. So this is not a land where where we would expect someone prominent to come from. Yet again, another reversal. And I have a map I want to show you. So let me get this pulled up. Okay, so this is Israel at the time of Jesus, 1st century AD or so. If you look where I'm circling with my mouse, that's Jerusalem at the bottom, sort of the bottom fourth of this image. I'm going to go up, and here's where Nazareth is. So, friendly reminder of the timeline. Joseph and Mary are traveling because of the imposition of the census. They start out in Nazareth. We get that from Luke's gospel. Matthew doesn't indicate that, but we get it from Luke's. They start in Nazareth, and they have to go back to where he was from, which was Bethlehem. So they're aiming for down here, for Judea, specifically Bethlehem, because that's his lineage, from the house of David, even though he's physically living in Nazareth, right? And interestingly enough, so they travel south for the census. Jesus is born in Bethlehem. He gets those visions, and they have to continue to flee even further from Nazareth, from their home. They have to flee to Egypt after being warned by that angel that it's not safe. Because Herod, this is right when Herod learned the Magi deceived him, and they went home another way. That's what it says in the scripture. And so this is why all the children in and around Bethlehem, in and around 2 years old or younger, were put to death. And it's definitely an echo, a sad echo, back to Exodus times when Pharaoh put to death the young babies, and Moses was saved by being put into the basket and put into the river. These definitely have some parallel themes here theologically. So knowing that and getting our context there, I got some questions that I want to ask you, and I will copy and paste them here into the chat. So bear with me 1 second.
I have an interjection while you're doing that.
Yeah, please. Yeah, well,
I think it's interesting that we never talk about, well, I mean, I guess we wouldn't, but we never talk about the blood and the death associated with his birth and how many children died.
Yeah.
And the sadness associated with that.
Yeah.
And we just don't think about it.
Yeah, I agree. I can't remember. I read it a few days ago. It could have come from Nadia Bowles-Weber, who's a Lutheran pastor. I can't remember where I read it, but Chris, to your point, um, they were saying the reality of what childbirth is, the essence of that is not even close to being captured in the birth narrative of Jesus and what that means. So yeah, I it's one of
Oh,
the
I was really meaning like all the babies that died because of
oh
the decree that was given.
oh
And
yes, yes.
yes.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay, yeah, sorry, I'm with you. I'm with
So
you. I
yeah,
understand.
I was past that. I was thinking about, the children that were put, let's say 2000 or whatever the number was.
Yeah.
And those children who died because Jesus was born and the king was on a death rampage.
Such a threat to his even an yeah, it's this is why I'm really grateful that y'all are here turning out for this study, is because we get to probe some of the deeper realities of what the birth scriptures are, and there's rawness tucked away in there, and sometimes not subtly but overtly, and it's important to remember that in the Christmas stories. Even though it's a holiday time where there's a lot of joy and cheer, there's definitely some pain in this
Mhm.
story too, and I think it's important to hold all those things together in
Yeah.
suspension with each other. I
Yeah. She
sure do.
wept, Rachel wept, and she would not be consoled.
Yeah,
That just sticks with you.
yeah, yeah. It sure does. I Here, let me get this first question out to everybody. All right, so yeah, once Joseph and Mary left Nazareth, they became refugees, unable to return home. So, how does this naming of the Holy Family as refugees affect your attitude to the displaced in our society and in the world? So, I'm asking you to make a mental leap, thinking about the fact that Joseph and Mary were refugees, we're Christians. What does that make us think about uh, to those who are displaced in our modern times? What do y'all think?
Well, I'll jump in just because I babble. There are two things that first come to mind. One is the fact that in society sometimes we forget that refugees are people, and
Mm,
we sort of take away their human characteristics, and that they are parents, they are children, they experience all the same things that we do, only they're coming from a different place in the world, and probably have experienced things even more difficult than we have. And then I think the second thing it does is it makes us look at Jesus and his family a little bit differently. We loved, like you said at the beginning, we romanticize this story, but this is a family that was sort of rejected and had a difficult life and experienced all of the negative things that we have sort of placed on some of these families that have come to our country. And I think it gives us a more realistic version of maybe the world, and makes us stop and think about, one, how we've looked at the Holy Family, and two, how we look at people today, and maybe we should
yeah.
change our lens a little bit.
Mm,
Or to piggyback on that, devil's advocate, maybe to explain why people didn't give them a place to stay. You know,
mm.
to say that they're looking at this family going, I don't have a place for you. I'm taking care of my own, the flip side of that.
There. I've read a handful of writers who, Chris, make that point too. That we read that there's no room in the inn. That's how it's rendered in the gospel. But is it possible there's more to the truth than that? Like you're saying, that maybe there was more to it. Maybe it was like an emotional thing, not a physical. We're out of space. It's definitely worth thinking about. Yeah. Something else too. I don't know. Well, I do know why this hopped into my head. It's a little related to this question, but it's something I want to tell y'all. So, Walk Through Bethlehem, the video has been filmed, and I was asked to help make a soundtrack for it. For those of you who may not know what it is, it's whenever it's not pandemic times, the church has an experiential nativity experience where people come, thousands. I'm not exaggerating that, and there's like a multi-acre structure set up outside that looks like first century Galilee, and you walk through it, and there are actors and people play roles, and it's not like a living nativity where you come and you're static and you watch it. You actually go through and experience it. So we filmed it this year. I was asked if I could help get the music for the backing track for it, and I tried. So Sandy Christos had a video to show me, and asked if I could approximate that. And it was a video of a Middle Eastern man playing an oud, a Middle Eastern instrument, and it's where the guitar descended from. I gave it a try, and I just wasn't able to get close to that sound because the guitar is a very Western instrument as I have it. So I remembered that there was a Syrian refugee family that my home church in Raleigh had adopted. And they had an evening one night where they brought that family to the fellowship hall and let them take over the kitchen. This is an extended family and their friends. Let them take over the kitchen. They got to cook their own authentic food for themselves, and they got to play music. And there was a man there named Abdullah who played the oud, and this was a few years ago, and I got to hear him. So I remembered that he played, and I got him recorded. When that video comes in the next couple of weeks, you're going to hear him playing the oud. And so a Syrian refugee is the soundtrack for the Walk Through Bethlehem video that we're going to see. And of course, I'm totally geeking out on how theological and fantastic I think that is. But I wanted to share that with you. It doesn't have to do too much with our story tonight, but a little bit. So what are some causes back to the lesson? So what are some causes for displaced families in our area, and then also in the world too?
Natural disasters.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Natural disasters is definitely one. How will I describe it? I think I'll call it legal systems that drag their feet, that keep people in places of being displaced. Again, back to that power thing. People, and this is not. I'm not painting everyone in power with one brushstroke. A majority of them, I find, rarely react fast to helping the need in the present. It's usually a very long road. Sometimes that's necessary. Sometimes I don't think it is. So I think laws, especially old ones, old arcane laws on the books that need to be wiped out or changed, I think that definitely keeps people displaced.
This is professor in me. Tell me more about that, John. Tell me what you mean by that, because I find that fascinating. So go a little deeper.
Oh, all right.
I mean, you mean like homelessness? What are you thinking about when you say that?
Let's see. I'm thinking. I'm gonna give you a good answer. I gotta formulate it.
I don't have the answer, so anything you say is fine.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
Yeah. Okay, I can think of one. So this one has to do. This is not necessarily about people who are refugees, but since you said homeless, it got me thinking about it. So people who face food insecurity. One area that always gets my goat, just gets me angered, is whenever SNAP programs are cut and rolled back. And that's an area where I think legally that's an example of how that keeps somebody displaced from food security wise, not necessarily a physical home, but I'm sure it affects it too. And I get frustrated when that happens. And I know this argument on the other side of the coin that, and I think this is a symptom of meritocracy and rugged individualism, sort of the weird quasi-nationalism religion of everyone can pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. You're just not trying hard enough. That's what whenever SNAP is rolled back, that one gets me. So that's what I mean by legal stuff, legal systems that keep people in places like that.
Right. We expect people to do something, but then punish them if they can't.
Yeah.
And SNAP. I work with somebody who runs a big SNAP program, so I
oh, nice.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes the causes for displacement, obviously, and from other countries are persecution, are um, might be differentness. You know, you think about sometimes when people do come to the United States, they not only come because they have some political issue, but it may be that who they are or what they are not accepted in their home country, and so, you know, going back is not appropriate, but they're displaced, and then they get here and they have nowhere to go because we
Yeah.
don't have are not either welcoming, or we have purposely put them in a place where they can't assimilate or
Mhm.
you know, be a part of our communities anymore.
Yeah.
We keep them displaced,
Yeah.
and sometimes we don't even let them in, and we keep them displaced in another country.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. There's a video I want to show y'all, and bear with me a minute as I pull it up. Zoom is a little bit odd in what you can and can't do while you're recording, so hang with me for 1 second. Getting there, getting there. Stand by. Oh, good. It's seems to be working so far. All right. This what I want to show you here. Yeah, perfect. We got time. As it loads, this is a.
Labradoodles,
Oh.
cronuts, squirts.
You're gonna hear that little advertisement. All right. It's a short documentary about a refugee's first night in America, and this is a few years old. What's beautiful about it is there the words are there's no narrator. It's just it's just video of the refugees coming into the airport hotel. This is their first night, and this also helps sort of poke our minds about refugee. So let me get share screen here, get this thing pulled up. Here we go. I got the volume maxed.
Your family have two rooms. Two rooms, okay? You have five, right? Yeah, two rooms. One is 16 and 17. One 12 and one 13 is with gems. Got you. Bring your bag. Your bag. Where's your bag? Oh, there. You don't have bag? Oh, okay. Bring that. See this? Well, we are mixed. Yeah, you can sleep together. You have two rooms. You want to sleep together? You are all together? Okay. The bathroom. This one. Okay. This one cold water. See? This one. Hot water. This is for the coffee, water. So right here. There's the soap, chicken, vegetable. What do you need? Or chicken or vegetable? Yes, chicken. Or chicken? Masu? Okay. Masu? Masu? Okay. You want masu? Okay. 105 was chicken. Chicken. Tell me what it has to do. अब अहिले चाहिँ छन् भेगमा कहाँ छन् हालेको सबै हुन्छ हालेको छैन होला
दुनियाँ बसेर त्यहाँ योजना भएन के भएन भने हामीहरू त त्यता सर्नु पाउँछ पाउँछ नि अमेरिका भित्र पाउँछ हामीहरू त क्यानाडा डेनमार्कतिर त पाउँदैन नि त्यही अमेरिका भित्र मात्रै त होइन पछि अब भएन भने सानो पाउँदैन त्यही अब 5 वर्ष योजना पुगेर त होला नि अब छिरिन सेप भएर त होला नि त्यही नयाँ प्रमाण पढ्नै पर्छ काम गर्नु भन्छ काम नगरेर खानु हुँदैन होइन जस्तो काम लाउँछ यस्तो उस्तो कस्तो काम पायो भने गर्नु सक्छ के चिज छ त अब आफ्नो रिभिजनमा हुन्छ अब यहाँ आज बसेर त सोध्नु पऱ्यो नि यहाँको त सोध्नु पऱ्यो नि त त्यहाँ जसको जस्तै छ side by side and finding that great deal. You did it as well with us.
पढेका थियौँ उनीहरू ठ्याक्ठ्याक लाग्यो कि अब हामीले जस्ताले के गर्नु त्यो छोराछोरीले त
अझै मैले डिसेम्बरमा साँझको 5 बजेतिर काठमाडौँ एयरपोर्टतिर आयो अफिसबाट लाँदा साँच्चै मलाई सबैबाट टाढो भयो जस्तो लाग्यो। मोबाइल केही पनि थिएन, प्लेनको विन्डोबाट हेर्दा केही पनि देख्दैन थियो, जताततै अँध्यारो थियो। घर परिवार र साथी सबैको याद साँच्चै आयो।
All right. I think that is an extremely powerful video, and it gets me every time I see it. The why it's so strong is because nobody narrates it. A narrator, they get out of the way, and the story is what their first night was like. The one that cracks me up, but also I think is a commentary, is when the two little boys are eating and they say, "I want to stay in this room forever." Like that level of what they were experiencing just blew their minds. One thing also is that to me, it seemed that even just, no matter what country they were from, in the parents, the adults, there was the same look in their face. That look of what is this? What is going to happen next? So I'm glad I got to show that to y'all. How did it make you feel? What did it make you think about?
The kids were still kids.
Yeah.
They were still laughing and playing, and the adults were concerned, but trying to put on a good face for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the teenagers were still teenagers. Where is my
Yeah.
makeup?
Yeah, I know, right? I thought that was good.
So
I
Johnny,
just,
oh, go ahead. No, please go.
just felt as if, I could just feel that sense of having left everyone and everything behind, being in a strange place, not even knowing what the food is or how to turn on the faucet. Somebody else is kind of telling you where you're going to be and when you go, and it just having no sense of real agency and what's going to happen to me next. Um, they had each other and they had their hope, and it seemed like those were the two things that they could hold on to. But they're very brave.
Mhm.
I was going to say what it reminded me of is back in 1980, my father was in charge of a Cuban refugee camp at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, as one of the Muriel boat people that came over from Castro. And we went to visit him, and I remember um, I was 18 at the time, walking among people and hearing their stories. And, we have in our mind this idea of who gets thrown out of a country. They're the poor people. They're the people that, some of them were prisoners. There were a lot of people, but, there were educated people. And in this one thing you say, there was somebody that said something about educated people like us, and they're trying to think about finding work. Well, can they find that same work in the United States as they had before? Will they be allowed to? Are they going to be, in menial jobs that are not worthy necessarily of them? I think the idea of they came with very little, and they've got all this new stuff that they have to get used to. Their food isn't the same. The air conditioning, what is the air conditioner? I don't know how to use the faucet. All of these things are so different, and yet at the same time, you can almost feel this sense of hope and this idea. I want to hold on. I'm not home. I love I also feel like they loved their home, but they had to leave it for whatever reason. So how can we keep our home with us while still embracing sort of this new world and trying to figure it all out? And I just I saw that with my dad when my dad was doing his thing, and it's even stronger, I think, in this movie, the documentary that you showed. I just think it makes people and human, and we don't think of it that way very often. So
Yeah, exactly. And I love that scene while the credits were rolling. The man, they were singing, and the man was dancing. Like, they're so precious little things that you can bring with you when you're in that situation. But your own music, your own cultural heritage and ethnicity in song, that's, if you got a voice, that goes with you wherever you go. And that was really nice to see. Yeah. Any other thoughts about the video? Then what I'd like to do, final thoughts here, I want to invite us all to do something. As we celebrate Advent and Christmas, let us remember babies born into families in either refugee or displaced situations in the 21st century, just as we think about it 2,000 years ago for Mary and Joseph's situation, and the other people in Scripture who are nameless to us. We don't have their stories, but no doubt there was displacement and refugee situations occurring when that census took place. So let us remember that Scripture has a lot of imperatives to care for the orphan, the widow, the refugee, right? So as we get bombarded with the secular themes of Advent and Christmas, let's think about this reality Jesus was born into, and to think about how we can be agents of change in the places that have not improved in 2,000 years as much. And the closing remark I want to leave with y'all comes from a writer named Alan Bozak. And he calls this Advent Credo. And so this is sort of like a call to action. And this will be our closing prayer. So I invite you to listen to this. It is not true that creation and the human family are doomed to destruction and loss. This is true. For God so loved the world, he gave his only son, that whoever believed in him wouldn't die but have everlasting life. It's not true that we must accept inhumanity and discrimination, hunger and poverty, death and destruction. This is true. I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. It is not true that violence and hatred should have the last word and that war and destruction rule forever. This is true. Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be on his shoulders. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, the Prince of Peace. It is not true that we are simply victims of the powers of evil who seek to rule this world. This is true. To me is given authority in heaven and on earth, and lo, I am with you even to the end of the world. It is not true that we have to wait for those who are specially gifted, who are the prophets of the church, before we can be peacemakers. This is true. I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. It is not true that our hopes for liberation of humankind, of justice, of human dignity and peace are not meant for this earth, they're not meant for this time in history. This is true. The hour comes, and it is now,